Good morning, everybody. This is a meeting of the General Government Committee. The time is 10:04. I'm calling the meeting to order. Today we are joined by Councillor Katie Walsh. Good morning, Councillor Walsh. Also joined by Councillor Saida Govan. Thank you for being here, Councillor. And we are joined by the Chair of the Health and Human Services Committee, Councillor Brian Santinello. Good morning, Mr. Councillor Santinello.
Good morning.
Also, we are joined by Duncan Davio, a physician assistant here at our local hospital, and Dr. Wayne Altman. Today, thank you, Focus Springfield, for always ensuring that these meetings happen on a timely fashion. Without you guys, there would have been no government during our crisis. So thank you so much for that. So the purpose of today's meeting is that we're going to be discussing in committee a resolution for the next to be brought up to the chambers for the next city council meeting, which is going to be April 8th at 7 p.m. April 8th at 7 p.m. And this resolution is for primary care for we talked briefly last time in the city council on this particular issue, and there was a little interest from the councilors, good reception from the councilors, and so we now would like to introduce a formal resolution to go to the House, to the Speaker, and to the President of the Senate. Just some key points. I'm going to turn it over to our distinguished panel here. Of the primary care for you, which is legislation S750. That will be S750. Some of the quick highlights of that is that primary care for you will double primary care investment in Massachusetts, will switch predominant payment model from primary care from fee for service to monthly prospective payments, thus allowing the primary care physician to spend more quality time with the patient as opposed to a volume. The system that we have here, the fee-for-service, is more volume-based. And we all know that according to the studies, those people that do use primary care tend to have a better healthcare, better health, which is ultimately the goal. This legislation, in my opinion, it will do two things. Will increase the health of people, and two, will take some of the pressure off the hospitals. Unfortunately, right now, the hospitals are being used as a primary care center. And I've seen it myself, first experience, that it's not unusual to have a 16, 24-hour waiting emergency room. And so we are going to turn it over to our panel to give us more details on the primary care for you. And again, I have Duncan W. and Dr. Altman. Gentlemen, the floor is yours. Whoever would like to go first.
Duncan, would you like to start, or would you like me to start?
I think you should probably go first.
Yeah, Dr. Altman, why don't you go first?
Sorry, you froze for a moment. What did you say?
We'll have you go first, Dr. Altman.
Okay, sure. Well, I just want to express my gratitude to you all for being here on a Monday morning to talk about this legislation. I think we are in a crisis. This is not a new crisis. Primary care access has been a challenge for a long time, although it's getting worse and worse. And what it looks like in our emergency departments, where people are waiting obscene amounts of time, is getting worse and worse. And what we've done in healthcare for decades now is had incremental solutions. We've put Band-Aids on this problem. And ironically, our job as family medicine clinicians and as primary care clinicians is to prevent bad things from happening. And what we do with our health policy is we put Band-Aids on and we don't do prevention. We don't address the root cause of the problem. Quite honestly, if I digress for a moment, too many doctors don't address the root causes of medical problems. And in health policy, we do the exact same thing. We don't address the root cause. So this legislation is designed to address the root cause. And I will tell you, we have states from all over the country who have been meeting with us, looking to us to establish this legislation and establish a national model in the same way that Romney Care 15 years ago became a national model for Obamacare. Neither Romney Care or Obamacare were perfect. Both of them had their flaws, but I'm pretty proud of the fact that Massachusetts has the lowest uninsured rate in the country at close to 2%. And so while imperfect, they did make some large shifts in how we think about healthcare as a human right for folks. And so we want to have that kind of historical impact with this legislation. And we need your support. I believe that the city of Springfield endorsing this legislation would be pretty significant in terms of our momentum, because next week we're meeting with the Massachusetts Municipalities Association, who is very excited about this legislation. And if they also support this legislation, I think that other municipalities will then join in. And so it's like a domino effect. If we tell MMA, Springfield has endorsed this legislation, then it gives some credibility. Then MMA says, well, we're going to endorse this legislation. And then I go meet with the mayor of Woburn, where it's this snowball domino effect. And it will allow our state legislators to move faster and more aggressively with this legislation.
Very well. Thank you, Dr. Altman. Duncan, is there anything you want to add?
So just to kind of echo what Dr. Altman has said, we're in a state of crisis. I work at Mercy Emergency Department, and we're frequently seeing 21-hour waits at our emergency department. We used to be the hospital where you could get in, get out, get the care you needed without having to worry about it. Patients are sitting longer and longer in the emergency department, and they're getting sicker and sicker. And the issue is we're not putting our investments where we need to, which is preventing people from having these diseases and these illnesses. When we treat diabetes appropriately, when we treat hypertension appropriately, we prevent those strokes and heart attacks and those complex things. So this is about our investments, but more importantly, this is about our values. We value the health and safety of our communities, and I think that this legislation is a way forward because there's been an increase in the number of burnout and the number of people leaving the Springfield area hospitals just because we cannot take care of the volume that's coming into our emergency departments. Base state is frequently 30 plus hours from what the rumor mill tells me from our EMTs in the community, and we're frequently at 21 hours. A couple weeks ago, we didn't have a single bed to see another new patient because there were so many inpatient orders. There was not a single bed to have another patient come into the emergency department. All hallway spaces were occupied. Every chair was occupied. It was a crisis. It was like a war zone. This is happening on a daily basis.
Duncan, if I may ask a question of you, those are pretty impactful statements. Can you describe, both Dr. Altman and yourself, the impact that this daily crisis has on the staff?
So we've seen a record number of nurses leave our emergency department as well as PAs and physicians. And it's not even just losing staff because you can always hire more people. But the problem is we're also hemorrhaging years worth of experience. A 30-year nurse who's been working in the emergency department has seen more. They serve as a beacon of hope for any type of provider. They've seen everything done. A new grad is working, they have the degree and they have the license, but they're not the same as that 30-year seasoned veteran nurse. And that's where we're really losing, and that's contributing to a further healthcare crisis because we're not making the appropriate investments, and this is leading to a workforce shortage. I know the state legislature is actively pursuing a workforce and labor development bill, and I think that this needs to be included because this is how we protect our providers and our nurses from getting all this burnout that's happening, preventing them from leaving the workforce.
Right. Now, Duncan, I believe my last question, I'm going to turn it over to my colleagues for questions. I believe that one of the fallouts of these ever increasing wait times in the emergency room. I believe you said 31-hour plus at the local hospitals. There has also been a correlation of increased violence against staff from patients themselves. Is that correct? Is that something that you can talk to?
Yeah, so patients are getting angry because they don't see the care that they're getting. We still do take care of patients, even though they're in the waiting room. They still get monitoring of vitals. Frequently, their workups will be started, but they're angry, they're scared, and I don't know any single person in my emergency department who hasn't been assaulted at some point, whether that's verbal assault or a physical assault that has happened.
Right, right. That's important to remember also that the assault doesn't have to only be physical. It could be equally damaging or more damaging verbal assault on a constant basis. And I think you could develop anxiety, PTSD as a result of that continuous exposure to stress. Thank you so much, Duncan. I do believe, Councilor Govan, you have a question, Councilor.
Yes, thank you so much, Mr. Chair. And thank you, doctors, for being here, for coming to the City Council meeting the other day. I was really impressed by your passion and your dedication to the field. And I'm a witness to those wait times in the ERs. I was a crisis clinician for a long time, and I would go to the ERs and do crisis assessments, and I would see the patients sitting there. And then I've, heard stories of people waiting at the ERs. And I think you said last week when you came to the City Council meeting that a lot of that was partly due to people not being able to get primary care visits. So how would this legislation affect people's ability to get into primary care before having to go to the ER? If you could remind me, I know you mentioned it last week, but just to reiterate.
It's a great question.
Mr. Chair. Go ahead, sir.
It's a great question, Councilor Govan. A lot of people look at this legislation and they say, people are leaving and frustrated, and the medical students aren't coming fast enough because they see all the burnout, and they also see salaries that are a half of their specialty colleagues. And so you might ask, well, then, maybe this legislation helps, but like 5 or 10 years from now, when the medical students finally figure out that things have gotten better and PA students have finally figured out that things have gotten better and choose primary care. But it won't take 5 to 10 years for this to move the needle, because what this legislation does is when it doubles primary care investment, it invests in very robust teams in the primary care setting. It also incentivizes primary care offices to have longer office hours and weekend hours and early morning hours and evening hours, because there's so many people. If they could have just called their PCP and got a quick question answered or a quick visit, they wouldn't have had to go to the emergency department. And the other thing is, I think that while it might take a few years for the medical students and PA students to catch up, I think we'll stop the bleeding when we fix the job by doubling investment in primary care. The exodus of people leaving the profession and decreasing their hours and retiring early will stop. And that will make a world of difference. So for all those reasons, this is going to have a dramatically positive effect on primary care access immediately.
Thank you for that. So I'm a part of the community faculty at Bay State for the PERCH program, which is the population-based urban and rural community health education program for residents that are graduating from medical school. And we just graduated 25 residents. I think 2 or 3 of them are staying local, so that's good. But I think Dr. Daviu said, or you actually said it, prevention, right? Insurance companies don't pay for prevention. And that's where I think a lot of our focus should be. So how does this legislation affect the prevention piece of it?
Yeah, so insurance companies don't pay for prevention is a complicated statement. They sort of do sometimes, but not in these circumstances.
They want to.
Yeah. And so when you are in our current fee-for-service model, you always have to ask yourself, and it sounds a little callous, but as physicians, unless you don't want to go out of business, you always have to ask yourself, does this get paid for? Does my
Mhm.
work get paid for?
Right.
If you spend your whole day doing work that doesn't get paid for, you can't keep the doors open.
Mhm.
And so in a prospective monthly payment model that we're proposing, you're paid per patient. So you
Mhm.
never, ever have to ask the question, does this work get paid for? In fact, your focus becomes completely aligned around prevention.
Mhm.
And that's the problem with our current healthcare system is all the incentives are aligned around keeping people sick.
Right.
In this
Mm.
new model, the incentives are aligned around keeping people healthy. It's
Mm.
really perverse if you think about it.
It really is. And I have an issue. This is my last question, Mr. Chair, or
Sure.
comment. I have an issue, of course, with all the insurance companies, period, right? Because their goal, of course, is to make money. They're not concerned about their patients, their members. They say they are, and they try to act like they are, but in the field, I'm in the field as well, and I have to submit claims and I have to wait for them to pay me, and as you all know, you submit a claim for, I don't know, $500, they'll send you a reimbursement of $200, and it's just not correlating to me. So I'm just hoping that this legislation does pass. Where is it at now in the House? Do you know?
Well, two comments. First of all, Zaida, I want to tell you that you are 110% correct about what you just said.
Yeah.
And I'm going to say something a little radical. I don't think we should blame the insurance companies. Even though you are 100% correct about what you said, it's America. It's a capitalist society. When people have a company, their job is to make money for their stockholders. They're doing what they're supposed to do.
Mhm.
It's our fault as a society for
Mm.
setting up a system that bases primary care on insurance, because insurance is for catastrophic and unexpected outcomes. Primary care is neither catastrophic nor unexpected. So we need to completely realign the system. If we want something different, we have to do something different, fundamentally different. This is in committee, the Healthcare Financing Committee, and the deadline come out of committee is this Wednesday, March 27th.
Mm.
So time is of the essence. Now, there are extensions that they can do, and they can also take pieces and parts of this legislation and put it into an omnibus bill. The legislative process is very complicated, as you know. But we are, the Senator Friedman has told us that getting the entire legislation out of committee by March 27th will be challenging, not impossible. But that she thinks that getting some significant pieces and parts out to kind of create a foundation so that when this legislation gets resubmitted for the next session in January of 25, it has some significant momentum. That also is a possibility. And while that doesn't move quite as fast as we would all want, these things do take time, and that would also be an important outcome.
Thank you. Thank you so much for those. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
You're welcome, Councilor Govan. Any other questions?
Yeah,
Councilor
Yeah,
Councilor Walsh, followed by Councilor Zeta.
well, thank you very much for this presentation. When my husband was ill, we spent an awful lot of time in emergency rooms and experienced exactly what you were talking about, long waits, being treated in the hallway, which I thought was so undignified, and
It's a good word for it.
frustration on the part of the patient and the staff. So so is Mercy Hospital the lead sponsor, and are other hospitals joining you?
So Mercy Hospital, I'm not here in my capacity as a employee at Mercy Hospital. I'm here in my capacity as the immediate past president of the Massachusetts Association of PAs, and we are a sponsor of this legislation.
Okay.
I'm just talking about my experience working in our community, because I think we can do a lot better for the citizens of Springfield and Western Mass.
So hospitals are not, how are hospitals involved? Because obviously Mercy and Bay State have status.
Yes. UMass, I believe, has signed on to the legislation, but to my knowledge, and I will defer to Dr. Altman, I don't think any
Well,
other hospitals.
I reached out to the CEO of Bay State, Mark Kerouac, And he carefully considered this and declined endorsing this legislation.
Mm.
Eric Dixon, the CEO of UMass, did endorse this legislation. I think that hospitals have two choices. One choice is the short-sighted, where having an understanding that hospitals need to invest some in primary care, because a world without primary care would be.
Yeah.
I believe she thought.
Or they could choose a long-sighted view where they invest in primary care, invest in this legislation, and eventually find hospitals flourishing, find that they're not overcrowded and understaffed because they've invested in primary care and given primary care the bandwidth to finally be able to do its job, which we desperately want to do. And
Mhm.
so I would say if this members of this group could reach out to Mark Kerouac and Bay State Medical Center and let them know the city of Springfield has endorsed this legislation and here's why, and we want you to reconsider your stance on this, I think that would be very powerful.
Retired, and they just announced a new head of Bay State.
Yeah.
System. Yeah, he just he retired. So, how about what kind of support are you getting from our local delegation?
Local delegation.
There's representatives and senators.
Is anybody from Springfield helping to Western Mass helping to advance the bill?
So I've had some informal conversations, and I don't ever want to put any words in people's mouth, with Senator Gomez about this. I actually bumped into him for a few seconds in the hallway after city council meeting. So I've spoken to them about it.
Because obviously that would be very important for the passage of your bill.
Yes.
And I believe you spoke with Senator Beals, correct?
Yeah.
I actually did not get an opportunity to speak with him the other night. I think he was kind of busy doing some background stuff and talking to constituents at the city council meeting. So I didn't have face-to-face time with him.
Well, I mean, it's my sense that our colleagues are very interested in and supportive of your initiative. Is that what you would think, Brian?
Yes.
Yeah.
Any other question, Councilor Walsh?
No, I just hope you're successful. Before I have to go to the room again, I hope you're successful.
So Councilor Santinello, followed by Councilor Guar.
Yeah, real quick question. The migrant situation that's developing in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, how is that not going to exacerbate the problem with the emergency rooms?
I just want to be clear, Councilman. Your question is specifically about the migrant crisis and how that's affecting
the migrant situation that's developing in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. Some of those people will be going into the emergency rooms and exacerbating the problem that you said you have.
Yes.
So how do we alleviate that?
So it's already starting to happen. I think one of the biggest things that I've seen personally is when we hit the shelter cap the end of last year, we saw more people headed towards the emergency department.
Mm-hmm.
We've had children as young as 10 days old in our emergency department boarding overnight, which has affected our ability to see emergency department patients. Actually, it was the weekend of Christmas. We had the Department of Transitional Assistance was specifically diverting people to Mercy Medical Center to come to our emergency department for immediate temporary shelter because the weekend of Christmas, there was nothing else that the state could do. So that is definitely exacerbating some of our burnout and some of our resources in the emergency department, and it really affects how we're able to care for more of the emergency issues. I want to clarify, obviously the immigration crisis is an emergency. Not having access to a home is an emergency, but it's not a medical emergency, which we're most adept at dealing with. So I think we need a more comprehensive response from the state, so that way these individuals do not end up in the emergency departments, because that's not frequently the best place for these individuals to be seen. Having children in the emergency department, there's a lot of scary bells and whistles and sights and images because people are sometimes in terrible situations. And I don't think that's the most therapeutic environment for these people who have gone through sometimes disastrous things.
Mhm.
Well put, Duncan. Very well put. Councilor Santinello?
Yeah, one last thing. We're the legislative branch of the city. How about the administrative? Have you talked to the administration about this? The mayor?
We have not. Councilman Davila, I know him as a paramedic who's fantastic within our community, and we just had these conversations in hallways and whatnot. So this was a good start.
Absolutely. Is that something, if there's appetite, Councilor Santinello, is something that we could try to orchestrate to meet with mayor on this particular issue, because it does have a domino effect through our city, and the domino effect is that we commit resources, both fire, ambulances, and police department, and that translates into money. So as we know, we are going to be engaging in the budget season in the near future. And so the two of the biggest departments that we have is fire and police department. So it's something that if there's appetite, Councilor, we could strategize and talk offline to see if we can see the mayor on this particular issue.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Councilor Gobat?
Yes, one more question, I guess. Why would the president of Bay State decline to endorse? Do you know?
I have to go back and read his email from way back when. I think in general hospitals, let me back up, Councilor Govan. In this legislation, when you double primary care investment, the money has to come from somewhere. So
Mhm.
where's the money going to come from? It's the elephant in the room, right? Who's going to pay for this?
Mhm.
And we did a very elegant simulation that showed that this would actually pay for itself within 40 years. The return on investment is pretty quick. And not only does it pay for itself, but the Commonwealth and the medical system as a whole will start saving money after 4 years, which is extraordinary in a world where healthcare is absurdly expensive and rising every year. The idea that it could actually come down is a little bit dreamy, but true. Now, it still begs the question, who pays for it for these 4 years while we're waiting for this return on investment?
Mhm.
And so what we think is that if you did nothing in the legislation to answer the question who pays for it, then the payers end up paying everything, which means they'll just turn around and pass that on to the consumers, which we think would be a catastrophic unintended consequence of this legislation. We do not want that to happen.
Right.
So what we are doing with this legislation is we're setting up a scenario by which a number of parties all invest a small amount and all stand to benefit greatly from this investment. And those people include large hospital systems. And Bay State would probably not qualify as one of the hospitals needing to invest in this. Hospital systems like Mass. As well as payers investing some of their reserves and record profits, as well as the pharmaceutical industry, imaging companies, and potentially urgent care centers would all be asked to invest and take a small haircut instead of one party being asked to shoulder the entire investment, which is unfair and inappropriate. I think now with that background, to answer your question, I think that there's a worry amongst hospitals that they'll be asked to shoulder too much of this investment, but that's not true. We're working hard to make sure that's not true. And I have an email out. Sorry, Duncan. I have an email out to Steve Walsh, who's the president of the Massachusetts Health and Hospital Association, to discuss this with him, and waiting to hear back from him.
Duncan, do you have a question? Yeah.
No, I just wanted to add on a little bit to what Dr. Altman said. I think that there is some incentive for hospitals to not have this pass. Simple fact that emergency care is more expensive. If a patient comes in and is worried about their blood pressure, the cost for them to check into that emergency department is substantially higher than if they go to their primary care provider. And those hospitals are making big revenue off of that. So there is some incentive in that ballpark for them to kind of not sign on to this system. I definitely give kudos to Eric Dixon for being very proactive and kind of being a leader in having his hospital sign on to this bill.
Thank you. And one more, if I may, please.
Sure.
So I know Councilor Santinello mentioned the immigrant crisis, the migrant crisis, but the homeless crisis, I think, is affecting ERs, because I remember, people would say, okay, I don't have anywhere to stay tonight. I'm going to go to the ER. And they would sit there and have a place to stay for 24 hours at least, sometimes, maybe more, without any real medical issues that needed to be addressed. So I think, all of these issues are basically, contributing to the crisis in the ERs. And there's some way that we have to address them. So I'm in the behavioral health field. I have a private practice. I deal with insurance companies. That's what I said. That's why I said what I said about insurance companies. So how is this, if at all, is that going to affect the behavioral health field, if any?
Well, you've just said a lot. Regarding people who are homeless or people who are migrants who are coming to our communities to try and establish a home in our communities, they're affected by what we call social determinants of health or social drivers of health. Challenges with housing, employment, transportation, access to medical care, food insecurity. And in many ways, it is addressing those social drivers of health is more important than a doctor per se. However, in this legislation, funds are reallocated to address social determinants of health in a preventive fashion so that we can care in the right way. And like, as a physician in an office, I can't directly help people with food insecurity. But if I have a social worker on a team that can help support patients with food insecurity, then I can prevent other illnesses that come down the line.
Right.
And so that's one of the things this legislation does. Another thing this legislation does is it financially rewards practices that have integrated behavioral health, that have mental health clinicians embedded in the office working with the clinicians, which is a very effective model. It also financially rewards practices that provide addiction care. These are all the transformers, as we call them, the community health workers, et cetera, et cetera. The last thing I wanted to say is based on the other comment about the hospitals. It's what Duncan said is absolutely true, that there's this idea that, hey, are we going to lose, even though it's utterly inappropriate for patients to get this kind of care at our hospital, it does pay a lot. So, okay. Yes, is that thought in the back of their minds? It would have to be. I think Duncan's point is absolutely correct. And at the same time, when you make access to primary care and you bring tens of thousands of people under the tent of appropriate healthcare that were never there before, those people will need colonoscopies for preventing colon cancer and pap smears sent to the pathology department of the hospital, and x-rays and lab tests and specialists and surgeries. So I think that the same volume that the hospitals want will be present, but it will be the appropriate care happening for people instead of inappropriate care. They just, it takes some long-sightedness and visionary thinking to understand that.
Very well.
Thank you.
Sure. Any other question?
Nope.
All right. So I just wanted to make a quick comment. I know we have said a lot, and from my personal experience, if I may, it is my understanding that some local hospitals who are nonprofit have consistently over the years made a profit, and good for them. But we cannot treat this as a business. This is a human right, for God's sakes, to get health care. Us in the medical field has this oath of doing no harm, of leaving people equal or better than we found them. And I think that when you start introducing, like Dr. Allman said, the money into it, people sometimes could get short-sighted as to what the real charge and the mission is. Also, we know that you do need to have some financial stability to help provide that care that people need, particularly in the emergency room when people go so distraught. They have so many things that want the lowest point of their life. I do want to make a quick story, if you may. My beloved mother, may the Lord rest her soul, passed away about a year and a half ago. And she went to a local hospital. Specifically, I can say this within my capacity as a city councilor, to Bay State Medical Center. She waited 16 hours and she was not seen.
Nope.
I finally called and she was 75 years old. She called me and she said, I need to use the bathroom. Well, my father was with her. My father's also elderly. My father wanted to stay with her. And I ended up calling the flow box and said, why aren't you guys helping my mother to at least go to the bathroom? But anyways, there was an incident in which somebody literally died in front of them, died. My father alerted them. It took them over 10 minutes to respond because they didn't believe my father. Oh, what do you know? What do you know? You're just a guy, you barely speak English, you don't know what you're talking about. That's how my father felt. Well, you know what? The guy was indeed dead in their emergency room. And then holy hell broke loose, all this running around. After a couple of those, which has happened at Bay State Medical Center, they now have a new system in which they have PCT, primary care technicians, taking your vitals and monitoring you. It's a good start, but we need to do better.
Mhm.
We cannot have people dying in front of you in the emergency rooms. It's
Victor.
unacceptable. And so people need to be treated with dignity. And so what I personally like with, if I may, Councilor Walsh, the late Mr. Walsh, Purple Heart recipient, Purple Heart.
Mhm.
This man was wounded in
Purple
the
Heart Brown Star.
Mhm.
Thank you. Purple Heart Brown Star was wounded with machine gun fire. And he told me that story. He didn't think he was going to come back, but he was here. He survived to be treated in a hallway.
Mhm.
Well, they didn't,
Preposterous to me.
Victor, they did not end up treating him in the hallway because I wouldn't let them. I wouldn't let them.
Well, good for you. But even just the
That's a
idea of
regular
the thought.
practice.
Yeah,
They do
yeah.
that all the time.
Fortunately, yeah, absolutely. And so my point is that the way I look at it, this legislation will help to ease the burden. And so I do believe, Duncan, since we have in terms of timeline, this is going to be coming out of committee at the House on the 27th. However, we were not able to get this into the next meeting for today because it's a hearings meeting. The next meeting, regular meeting, which I will make sure that it gets into for the formal resolution, will be April 8th at 7 p.m. So Duncan, and actually, it was suggested to me that maybe we can send a letter to the appropriate people highlighting the points. And I believe that this letter is to Governor Healy, to Undersecretary Mahan, Secretary Walsh, Senator Friedman, Rep. John Lone, Karen Speaker, the Senator President, the Speaker of the House, Senator Gomez, Rep. Carlos Gonzalez, and I will add to that both the CEO of Bay State Medical Center and Mercy Medical Center as well. I believe you have a letter you want to share with us, Duncan, I believe?
I can finish that up today for you and we can get it to you.
Hey, Victor, can I interrupt for 1 second?
Harry, how are you?
I'm good, thank you. And I think I'm
Welcome.
in the wrong meeting. I did get a reminder about a 10 a.m. meeting, and I was afraid that maybe it was the 2 p.m. meeting that had been changed, where the time had been changed.
Oh, no, yes, you got the wrong link. It's the same link, but for the 2 p.m.
Okay. I
Yeah,
will, see
yeah.
you I will see you at 2 p.m. I am a supporter of death with dignity and to treat people as people, throughout the process. And everyone is deserving of that. So I will leave you now, and I will see you again at 2 o'clock.
Very well, Harry. Thank you. Thank you.
Victor?
Dr. Alman?
Let me just jump in for a quick second. First of all, thank you for your comments just a minute ago. Our healthcare system should be here, if nothing else, to provide compassion and dignity to people in their moments of need. And when we're falling short of that, that's the ultimate fail of a healthcare system. And you really articulated that beautifully. And I want to offer some feedback to one thing that you said about companies and nonprofits and profit and so on. I am speaking to you from California right now. I was asked to come out and present on this legislation at a national conference for insurance companies, executives, and people who run physician organizations. And it was very well received. And I presented a slide. I'm going to see if I can share. I just want to show you this slide.
Sure.
Are you able all to see that slide?
Yeah.
Yes.
So I presented this slide to folks, and this is how I see our current healthcare system. It's profit and self-interest that is overweighing health and equity and dignity, as you put it. And what I'm hoping for this legislation to do is make health and equity the priority. And it kind of is an indication or a demonstration of what Victor was just talking about. And so the feedback I got when I presented this slide from somebody was, if you could change your slide and make it so that this scale was even and not having the health and equity outweigh profit, because you need companies to be able to make a living, to have a profit, and to succeed. Don't tell companies that they can't make a profit. And I thought, you know what? Fair enough. That's an okay compromise. I could redo the slides so that it's even. And I told him, I said, we'll take that deal. We'll take the deal of health and equity being on par with profit, because right now it's not even close.
We have. That's right. That's right. That's right.
Anyways, you just made me think of that, Victor, when you were making your passionate plea.
Thank you, Dr. Alman. So I think, and I'm just thinking outside of the box here, councilors. So maybe perhaps, Duncan, if you send that letter, we can circulate it, and then councils can sign on accordingly. And we will instruct the council staff to send it out to the appropriate people. Duncan, if you could just write as well to who the letter is addressed to.
Yeah.
CC, and then I was hoping that we could take a vote from the subcommittee, but you don't have it with you. So I think the best thing would be to have the council sign on to it. And then on April 8th, which is next 2 weeks from now, I believe. Let me see. Yep, 2 weeks from now, present it formally to the resolution which you gave us to the city council for formal passage in the city council chambers. And then that will be sent out to the people that you have indicated on.
Okay, this is fantastic. So a lot of good action steps here. We've got the April 8th meeting, wonderful. We've got this letter that's going to be sent out, and we'll get through the steps that we need for that to happen. Wonderful. I'm wondering if we're at a place where we could formally state that the two subcommittees of the city council of the city of Springfield are endorsing this legislation. Is that proper?
Let's see.
We don't have a quorum of the other committee.
Yeah, we have a quorum of the Health and Human Services. We do have a quorum of the general committee. Councilor Walsh, your thoughts?
Yeah, but I'd like to see the letter first and what we're going forward with before I take a vote of the committee. That's my opinion.
Of the
Yeah.
Yeah.
The resolution, and also the letter that Duncan's sending over.
Right.
Okay,
But I do believe, I think you were asking Dr. Allman is for the committee to vote supporting this, correct?
yes.
Okay.
I think our committee can certainly support the legislation.
Okay.
I just have a couple of personal questions I want to ask before I sign on.
Onto the
For
letter. That's
myself.
fine. That's
For
fine.
myself.
That's fine. So, Council
I'll make-
Santinelli, you probably can follow up with,
I'll make a motion if you want
Duncan.
me. I'll make the motion that we support the,
Yeah, to make a form, I will need you to make a motion, Councilor Walsh.
I'll make the motion that we support the legislation and report it to the full council.
Very well, then I second that, and, how do you vote?
Aye.
I vote aye, so, supporting, the general government just voted to support, primary care for you, which is, S, 750, correct? If I'm not mistaken.
S-750, yep.
Yeah, 750,
And,
in the Senate, and,
and when we
go
do
ahead.
that, and when we do that, we need to pass it on to the delegation. Now, you have an opportunity because this year is an election year. I mean, you have an opportunity to bring this issue up in forums for discussion, because I'm sure
Right.
there are a lot of people that would much rather be treated by their
Absolutely.
care than go to the emergency room. So you have an opportunity.
Absolutely.
You may not realize it, but you have an opportunity.
Right, right. Very well. So, Dr. Alman, Duncan, you can share with your colleagues that the General Government Subcommittee has endorsed, voted to endorse this. The Springfield City Council General Government Subcommittee has voted to endorse this legislation, and we will be circulating that letter to sign on for those councils that would like to sign on. Again, we will be putting this on the agenda for April 8th for formal endorsement through via resolution for the City Council. And Duncan, if you follow with Councilor Santinello for specific questions that he may have, that would be very helpful. I believe you
Now-
gentlemen have both your
I
numbers.
would like to sign on to, Mr. Chair.
Very well. And we will put Councilor Govan as well. So very well. So quick time check is 10:50 now. Any last comments from anybody? Any thoughts you would like to finish with?
One
No.
last question. It was discussed about the new CEO of Bay State. Does anyone know the timing of that? Has that already happened? Is it about to happen?
It's about to happen. I think Dr. Kerouac will be leaving shortly, but he's still there.
He's gonna
think-
be, in June, he's gonna,
That's
Mr.
right.
Kerouac will be gone.
Yes, yes.
But they did announce a new,
Yeah, it's,
yeah,
succeeding Dr. Kerouac, let me see.
Yep.
who's
Do
going
any
to
of
be.
you have a relationship with that leadership that such that you could facilitate a meeting between us and them?
Probably, he's retired, but Dr. Frank Robinson, do you guys know Dr. Frank Robinson?
mhm.
And I know Anna Marie Golden, she's the vice president of community relations, I believe. So I could certainly make that introduction.
Fantastic.
Yeah, I think ideally, do we know if the new CEO is an internal person or a new person coming?
I want to
From,
say they're coming from outside. Let me look at
Yeah,
the,
I think you're right, Councilor Govan.
he's
coming
from
from
Colorado. Wait, no, they did an extensive search. Dr. Peter, I don't know if he's a doctor. Peter Banco will join the organization in June. Peter most recently served in Colorado. So he's coming from Colorado.
Okay, I've heard of Colorado. So I think probably it makes sense to connect with him. I'm going to say September. Let him get his feet wet,
Mhm.
get through the summer. And so maybe we can reach out to him and through some of these channels that you mentioned, Zaida,
Okay.
in the fall. So if we
Yeah.
can put a pin in that and maybe think about that for September.
All right. So when you get ready, if you want, let me know and I'll make the introduction to one of the vice presidents.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Excellent, excellent.
Thank you.
Well, any other councilors, any thoughts, closing thoughts?
Nope.
No, I just want to thank you guys for your passion,
Thank you.
doctors,
Indeed.
and for
Yeah,
wanting
good
to
luck.
be make sure that our community has what they need.
Excellent, excellent. Very well. Duncan, could you get that letter to me by tonight?
Absolutely.
Letter to me, I'll send it out tonight or tomorrow morning at some point. I prefer to do it tonight, to be honest with you. And very well, with that being said, I'm calling adjourn this meeting at 10:54.